Let's talk about probability and odds. The probability that an event will occur is the total number of favorable outcomes over the total number of possible outcomes. We can also define the probability of failure in the reverse. So let's talk about some examples. We're going to roll a six-sided die. So that's just a regular die that you roll to play a game. The possible outcomes or sample space for a six-sided die is that you could roll a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6. So there are 6 possible outcomes, and this represents that sample space. So on a six-sided die, if we roll and we want to find the probability of rolling a 5, there's 1 5 within that sample space. And so there is 1 favorable or successful outcome out of a total of 6 possible outcomes. So the probability that you would roll a 5 is 1 in 6. How about an even number? There are 3 even numbers in the sample space, and so there are 3 favorable outcomes out of a total of 6 possible outcomes. And so the probability is 1/2. You can also write your probability as a percent, or you can write it in decimal form. It just depends on the way that the problem is asked and what's appropriate for the situation. Next, we have a number greater than 4. So for numbers greater than 4, of course, that does not include 4 itself, but 5 and 6 are greater than 4. And so that is 2 outcomes that are favorable out of the 6 possible outcomes. And then we'll simplify that to 1/3. Let's check out example 2. You are choosing socks from a drawer in the dark. The drawer contains 5 white socks, 4 black socks, and 6 gray socks. So we'll add the number of socks together, and the total possible outcomes is 15. There are 15 different socks. So let's find the probability that you'll choose a gray sock. There are 6 gray socks out of a total of 15. So 6 out of 15 is the probability, and then we'll simplify that to 2/5. The probability of choosing a white sock, there are 5 white socks, so 5 ways that you could succeed out of 15 total, and that simplifies to 1/3. Finally, the probability that you will choose not a black sock. So basically, we're looking at the total of the other 2 types of socks that we could choose. So there are 5 white socks and 6 gray socks for a total of 11 socks that are not black out of a total of 15, and that one doesn't simplify. Let's take a look at odds of success and odds of failure. So odds are different from probability. Remember that probability is the total number of ways you can succeed over the total number of possible outcomes, both success and failure. Odds are just a ratio of success to failure, or vice versa, okay? So let's look at our six-sided die situation. The odds of rolling a 5, well, on a die, the possible outcomes are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. There's only 1 5 on the die. So there's 1 successful outcome, and there are 5 other failure outcomes. So the odds of rolling a 5 are 1 to 5. The odds of rolling an odd number, we've got 5 is an odd number, 3 is an odd number, and 1. So we have 3 successful outcomes, and then there are 3 failure outcomes. So 3 to 3, which simplifies, and we do simplify these ratios. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. And then numbers that are divisible by 3. So in this sample space, there are 2 numbers that are divisible by 3. 6 and 3 are divisible by 3. So there are 2 successful outcomes here, leaving 4 unsuccessful or failure outcomes, and that simplifies to a 1-to-2 ratio. Let's take a look at our sock drawer example. So we had 5 white socks, 4 black, and 6 gray. So if we are choosing a black sock and we want to find the odds that we choose a black sock, there are 4 black socks in the drawer, and there are 11 that are not black. So 4 black and then 5 plus 6 that are not black. So the odds of choosing a black sock are 4 to 11. The odds of choosing a sock that is not black, so we're going to find the number of socks that are not black, which is, again, 11, to the total number of black socks, which is 4. So this is just the reverse of the previous odds. And then the odds that you choose a white sock, there are 5 white socks, and there are 10 socks that are not white. And then 5 to 10, we can simplify that. It's a 1-to-2 ratio. If the odds of an event are 5 to 8, what is the probability of the event occurring? So we're given the odds. The odds are 5 to 8. And remember that odds is success to failure. And we want to find the probability. So the probability is going to be success over the total possible outcomes, both successful and failing. So in this case, the success is 5. The ways that you could succeed is 5, and the total possible outcomes is the success plus the failure, which is 5 plus 8. So the probability of the event occurring would be 5 out of 13. Next, we're going to look at a compound event where you're doing 2 things at the same time. It says you flip 2 coins, and we're going to write out the sample space for all of the possible outcomes. So if I flip 2 coins simultaneously, there are outcomes for each coin sort of separately from one another. So I'm going to create a table, and we'll use tables like this for rolling dice or choosing a card and other things like that. But this is a pretty simple one. So I'm going to make a table for coin 1 and coin 2. And the possible outcomes for each. So the possible outcomes for coin 1 are heads or tails. And the possible outcomes for coin 2 are also heads and tails. So if coin 1 gets heads and coin 2 also lands on heads, then that's one possible outcome, that both coins land on heads. Then next we have coin 1 landing on heads and coin 2 landing on tails. Third, we have coin 1 landing on tails and coin 2 landing on heads. And then finally, both tails. So there are 4 possible outcomes when you are flipping 2 coins. And we can write them in a table like this. So this part of the table actually represents the possible outcomes or the sample space, or we can write it using set notation in the way that we wrote the dice outcomes up above. So we could have heads, 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 tails, tails, heads, or 2 tails. Now you're ready to practice on your probability and odds practice and your possible outcomes practice. Pages 4 and 5 from today's resources. Good luck!